Hi everyone, welcome to the Car Chat podcast, and with us this week we have Justin Lunny. Hello.
Hi Sam, how are you doing?
Very good, very good. Can you tell the audience a little bit about sort of who you are, what you do?
Yeah, of course. My name is Justin Lunny. As I say, I am the CEO and founder of Everrati. Everrati has been formed to produce some of the world's most iconic electric cars.
Right. Okay. Let's sort of dive back a little bit, and then we'll get to what you're doing right now. Then, what's been your journey? Sort of, have you been involved in cars for a while, or not really?
So my background is actually a car lover from as long back as I can remember. My journey into cars was really like many people who have a passion for cars and been fortunate to own quite a few different vehicles myself. But my background is actually technology. So I've been in tech, been sort of producing, building businesses really around payments and technology. And it's given me a good background in terms of technology itself, but also some of the technology we're now using in our cars and taking them forward as brand new, redefined vehicles, really. So that's how I got to this point.
Okay. And then, so what made you think, okay, I want to start a car company? Because generally car companies don't make any money. So,
well, I woke up one day. No, I think so I've been fortunate to grow a couple of businesses, sold them, and thankfully that's been fairly successful. But I think two or three things happened for me actually. So I had a view on EV, and this was probably about 7-8 years ago, which was to say, it's definitely coming. There's no return. And whilst at that point I didn't have the idea for Everrati, it was more that I could see these things happening and coming forward. Clearly, the Tesla effect has just grown and grown and grown. Background in tech, so actually looking at how EV and I guess clean technologies was a market, and could I somehow get into that industry itself, but also being a car lover, from a very young age, it just became something I wanted to do. Tied with that, I used to live right in the centre of Windsor, right opposite Windsor Castle. Saw Harry and Meghan leave the castle in the electric E-Type, and it really was one of those light bulb moments to say, this is really cool. There's something here. And frankly, why we're doing what we're doing is we want people like you, like me, like other listeners to think about EV in a different way, which is they can be cool, they can be fun, they can be engaging, and you can get out of an EV in the same way as you might do about your beautiful cars today, and look back and be proud of it and love it. And that's really what we're all about.
Okay. And then, so you decided, let's do something with this project. What's the process from then? Are you basically going like, let's find the tech and then find the cars, or did you got an idea for a car and then started working on that?
Yeah, so I had a couple of ideas for cars. So the two that really stood out for me, from being again a kid really and having cars on my bedroom wall, but there's various cars out there that clearly the key one for us has been our 911, which we'll no doubt talk about. Another one that bizarrely my uncle had when I was growing up was an SL, Mercedes SL. It's a beautiful car, not a performance car, but something that he really enjoyed. Our process has been very much define the kinds of cars we want to look at. But then I have hired a team, and actually my business partner, his background is entirely automotive, so he's been in space for 15 years, worked for high-profile businesses, including Mercedes-Benz for the last 10 years. So very much looking at how we build a quality product and how we can essentially take these beautiful vehicles and redefine and re-engineer them, as opposed to just convert them. And I think there's a definition there.
Okay, so because I guess a lot of people might look at some of these things and go, because I know with, let's say, a 911, an old 911, you can take the powertrain out and literally put in a motor, and then you can swap it back. So this has gone beyond just that.
It has indeed. So I think that my engineering team is largely UK based, but ex-JLR, McLaren. Spent some time at Lotus. We've got battery technicians, we've got low voltage technicians, we've got drivetrain engineers, and really our process is very mindful of the original vehicle. So when we're defining specification, we say, what does that car got to weigh, ideally? Clearly, what's the performance and what's the range? So those three elements are always in our mind in terms of how we specify a vehicle. And you're absolutely right. There are people out there that can rip apart, dare I say, a Nissan Leaf or some other car, put the bits in something else, and call it an electric car conversion. And, some of those are successful, some aren't. I personally think there's going to be a lot more regulation around that space, because I think actually there are some risks associated with doing it that way. But in essence, we take an original vehicle, we weigh it so we know exactly what it should be four-corner weighted. We take out the drivetrain very carefully so we don't damage the chassis. We then 3D scan the space that we've got left, and then we had to design a brand new drivetrain for that car with those features in mind. So weight distribution, range and performance, and really try and define and engineer that vehicle such that the finished product is as close to the original as we possibly can, and drives like it should as well, because it's pointless getting a 911 and it weighing 300 kilos more than it should have done. It just wouldn't be a 911 anymore.
Is that quite a difficult task making? Because you've done, your build is based on is it a 964 or a 903?
Right. 964.
So what does a 964 weigh? 1,300 kilos?
Yeah, 1350, something like that. I mean, our car, the one that we've had in the press quite a lot recently is the sort of signature wide body car. That actually, bizarrely, and most people are shocked, weighs less than the original. So we've shaved about 40 kilos off the original weight in terms of the wet sort of curb weight. We've done it actually largely around things like carbon fibre panels, so front wings, roof, bonnet, and in fact doors on that car. But even without all of that, it's not hugely different from the original. And weight distribution again on that car is 60-40, so 60% rear, 40% front. So again, almost identical to the original. So that's been really important. So I think our process is fairly involved. It's about a 6-month process to fully re-engineer a car. So we're not about, there are people out there that are, doing, let's say, a Porsche today, a Land Rover tomorrow, a E-Type the next day, and a Ferrari the next day. We're all about almost treating this as an OEM would, as a manufacturer would, redefining them, redesigning the drivetrain such that they come out of our workshop, out of our facility, as a beautifully finished car that people can hopefully enjoy and in the same ways they might have done, although this one won't leak oil on the floor.
You hope. Stuck in there for the previous time. Now you say you won't do all these different cars. I'd had a little look on your website, and you do like 4 or 5 different cars.
We do. That's right. So what we do is each one of those has been fully engineered. So to say, rather than doing on one day or 1 month doing one car, so effectively each build program takes about six months, or an engineering program. And then we can offer those as finished cars to our customers. So our Porsche, for example, we've had customers from quite a number from the UAE, quite a few folks in the UK, a couple of guys in Switzerland, a lot in the US. So our model is to really design and prove the whole car effectively as a finished car, and then we build them to order. So in essence, we expect to build a number of 964s over a period of time, clearly. We're just about to launch our Land Rover series, so it's the predecessor to the Defender. Really cool little car. It's not for long journeys. It's about having fun, in town or by the beach or on your, dare I say, country estate. But it's something that is really cool. 120 odd mile range, so it's not something that's going to go, for long journeys. That said, I think most of those cars you'd need a chiropractor after about 30 miles anyway. The original, but it's all about just looking at these beautiful cars, fully restored, nut and bolt restoration, but then with a drivetrain that suits the environment for those cars. And again, that one, we're going to have that at a few shows soon, and the feedback's been great. We're already building customer cars, and really exciting time for that. Yeah.
With these builds, are you aiming to sort of do a pristine version? Okay, so let's say 964, I've not had I've seen the car, but I've not really had a look around or anything. Are you looking to do a sort of pristine 964 that is electric, or are you sort of taking that into a bit more like 2021, evolving different bits of the car at the same time?
Yeah, it's kind of down to customer choice, really. So at the moment, we've got what we call 2 trim levels. So one is our pure range, and that is as close to the original, albeit slightly updated. So that has an updated interior, again true to the original 964. It just doesn't look like a German boardroom, right through to having things like Porsche CCCM, PCCM, upgraded air conditioning systems and everything else. But to the untrained eye, that would be a narrow body, beautifully restored. To the untrained eye, looking original like a 964, but beautifully restored. And then our signature range adds to that. So generally speaking, our signature range is wide body. We have options such as upgraded fully adjustable electronic suspension. We have a variety of other aspects to that car. We have noise generation, so if you want it to sound like flat six, you can. If you want to do V6 or a V8 or something different, you can as well. And when I show you around the car, you'll see what I mean by that. It's quite an interesting concept where you can switch it on and off on your app, but essentially you can have that car sounding like the original. And when you start the key, it vibrates through the chassis as if it was an original car. So it's quite fun.
I remember. I've heard it. It's on. I think I was at Festival Speed and it was on, and I walked past it, and I was like, "Hang on a minute! I know this is an electric car. What is going on here?"
We had I don't know who the gentleman was, but one of my colleagues was it might have been the guy you mentioned earlier, was actually on the app, and there was a gentleman leaned down to the exhaust pipes with a pipe in his hand, and then somebody revved it on the app, and this pint went pretty much everywhere. So yeah, it definitely shocks a few people when we have it on. In fact, I was driving it actually in town in London not so long ago, and pulled up some lights, and somebody stopped me and said, "Oh, that's beautiful," but I thought it was electric, and of course we had the sound on. So it's kind of that whole juxtaposition, but people actually quite like it. It's quite a nice experience.
It's kind of a fun, something a bit different, I guess,
Absolutely.
to add in there. With the all the electric side of it, where are you getting your batteries and powertrain and stuff like that from?
Yeah, so in the main, everything that we're doing is all around using OEM proven, essentially components that we then integrate ourselves. So all of our batteries are brand new, for example. Power electronics are brand new. The essence of what we're trying to do here is ensure that we don't, as I said before, without discrediting them, there are people out there that are just pulling cars apart, and we've got a very different approach. Ours is a fully engineered approach. The Porsche itself does actually use a Tesla drive unit itself, just because from a packaging and weight distribution perspective, it works really well. The performance of that motor is incredible as well for what we need. That said, on some of our other cars, so for example our GT40, which is going to be testing towards the end of the year, that has twin IPT motors. IPT are a British company that we're working with in Oxfordshire. They did the motors for the Neo EP9. They also did the motors for the VW IDR. So we're looking at 800 horsepower peak on that particular car, 800 newton meters of torque. So again, this is kind of where we're taking the business, which is to be known for the very highest quality and performance, but dare I say but it's got to be relevant to the car. So we would never, even if somebody asked us, we'd never put 500 horsepower in a Defender because it wasn't built for it. Whereas actually a Porsche chassis can take 500-600 horsepower. GT40 can take what we're putting in it, but it's always got to be appropriate for the vehicle.
GT40. That is such an iconic sounding car. I mean, so is a Porsche, but that would be interesting to see how that comes across. How long do you think before that one will be?
So we're going to be testing that towards the end of this year. It's available to order now. In fact, we've got a few people very keen on that car because we've got people who are collectors or original owners of GT40s that probably never drive those cars. Our relationship there was with, I don't know if you know Superformance. Superformance have the effectively their continuation cars. So they are using most of the original sort of designs and tooling for GT40s. They also happen to own the rights or the ability to put the GT40 name and Shelby name. So that's going to be quite interesting. But in essence, we've got a guy at the moment in Europe who has an original car. Yes, he might take it out 2 or 3 times a year to the odd show, but if we can build him an exact copy, but fully we'll have a sound platform on it. It won't be as loud because that's just not even possible. I think, ear bleeding is not what we're about, but it has the ability to sound pretty real. And yet you can drive it anywhere, and as you probably know, there's parts of, not only London, but, parts of various cities in Switzerland and Paris, or France and various different places in Europe where you just can't drive some of these cars anymore. And that's going to be really interesting. Again, I can't wait for the day to drive one of our really, really eyeful cars, a GT40 through a low emission zone. It's going to be quite a lot of fun.
You'll have people listening to the podcast that will be like pulling their hair out at the idea of this. But it's not like you've taken one of the original GT40s and done something with it. It's a super performance one, which is basically exactly the same, but built now. And your point about using these cars, like a lot of cars as they get older are a little bit more difficult to use, especially the race cars. You don't necessarily just want to start them up and take to the pub. Yes. Pretty cool if you did, but not that easy. Whereas I guess putting them to making a car, let's say it's not an original GT40, it's like a different car at this point that you can get in. It's got really good aircon that you can just sit in the car, turn it on, do all the stuff like that. Do you do something with the gauge? What do you do with the gauges and stuff like that?
Yeah, so the gauges, again, we try and keep them as original looking as possible. So an example is our Porsche gauges, the gauges, should I say, on our Porsche, which are very, very similar looking to an original Porsche. In fact, they're somewhere between, bizarrely, the original and, say, the Singer dials, sort of in terms of look and feel. But they're obviously now showing different data. But in essence, they're in the same place. We're not really about putting screens in our car if we can help it. Again, to the untrained eye, we think it's quite important that they look as original as possible. That's quite a challenge in some ways. EV data is, as you know, very different to a combustion engine. But in essence, we try and make them as original as possible and look and feel like they should be there. And that's the key thing for us. And
when you get in the car, does your phone just connect to Bluetooth or something in the car? Right. And then you can play music and whatever.
Absolutely. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I mean, bizarrely, Porsche helped us quite a lot because actually when we were defining the audio system on our 964, was about the same time that the Porsche PCCM singled in classic unit came out, and that works perfectly in our cars, and you got Bluetooth, you've got CarPlay in a 1991 vehicle, which has been really, really, really handy for us, definitely. And it just fits, right? It's a Porsche unit. There are other things we're doing for our other cars where we're hiding a lot of this, hiding the head unit entirely because it just wouldn't be appropriate to have it on show. But again, it's all part of that kind of surprise and delight, I suppose, when you get in a car, you've got your creature comforts, it's got heated seats, you can actually use it. I mean, your point about cars being either not used or put away, I think there's a whole market of people that just love the look of some of these cars. The Pagoda, I think, is become such a timeless vehicle. But actually, there's a huge swathe of people who love the idea of owning one, but just wouldn't dare to drive it because they don't want to get let down and it break down the side of the road. And then on the other side, something like the GT40, we've actually engineered that it could do some track work. And, I can see them running around Goodwood on days where noise restrictions are in, and we can just can blast it around the track without worrying anybody.
God, are your cars go-kart like in the sense of they're 2 pedals, Or do they have, because I've seen some electric cars that have some kind of shifting situation. What do you have?
Yeah, so at the moment, it is, so it's 9 times out of 10, and I think probably almost 10 times out of 10, it will still be 2 pedals. So it will be, go and stop. That said, we are looking at, and we are working on quite considerably on things like the virtual gear change. So actually doing a torque interrupt where the original motor would have done. And we can actually map the torque curve on these cars as close to the original as we want as well. And that combined with the other NVH, so the other feedback on the car. So the sound, obviously, we've got some conversations with some companies that build race simulators. So again, having some of that feel, within an electric car is quite an interesting concept. And do you get hit in the back of the chair when it changes gear, for example? There's lots of options around that. It's not original, but it's intended not to be original, because the fact is, it's not the original. We're not claiming it to be. We're just saying it's a very, very good option for those who want to be able to use these cars in the future.
It's an interesting idea playing with the mapping, because yes, I guess then you can have a gear stick, whether it's like a sequential or whatever, and you could literally just define the torque curve up to that point, and then you hit a limiter, and then you click, and then it's dunch, the same thing. So you can exactly simulate gears.
That's exactly right. And that, again, for the kind of customers we're talking to, for some of them that just isn't interesting, right? If you're going to go to Land Rover, not interesting. It's all about cruising and enjoying your vehicle. On the other side, as you rightly say, for people who are dare I say, petrol heads, and they actually want some of that involvement, that engagement. It's the same with modern cars today. If you jump into your 812 or whatever, you either have it in auto mode or you can use the flappy paddles. You're not really doing much different to what you've just described in many ways. So it's a similar thing. Right?
Quite different, but yes.
Yeah, but you know where I'm coming from. It's there's an engagement level there, and we can certainly engineer a lot of that back into these cars. And that, I think, is fun. Like these cars in the main are about fun. They're about people who love vehicles, love the look of them, but want to be able to drive them into the future. And it's getting increasingly difficult to do that in lots of parts of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And central London, we know it's coming. There's other parts of the world that are already there where you're just not going to be allowed to drive something that's not an electric into town. Right. And therefore, you just removed all of these cars from history that everyone loves.
Absolutely.
And you won't be able to drive them. So yeah, I totally see it. I have a Peugeot E208. That's my sort of city town car. Bought that a couple of months ago. And I love driving an electric car around London. For all of the reasons. One, I know I'm not polluting and that sort of stuff. But also, it's easy. You never go to a petrol station. It's always charged. You don't pay congestion charge. How long that will last for, I don't know. Parking's really cheap. Likewise, how long will that last for, I don't know. But at the moment, it's really quite a nice thing driving an electric car around town. And not having the noise is fine.
Yeah, it's funny. My daily driver is a Taycan, actually. And I do a fair amount of miles in that car. But like you, I mean, it is... it's very different to a couple of the other cars I've owned and still own, actually. But the reality is it can be a lot of fun. You'll never tire of the torque, just being able to just put your foot down and enjoy that. But the other thing people worry about, obviously, is things like range anxiety. And I do get that. That said, for me personally, my use case is I drive from my home, which is about 65, 70 miles from our facility, our HQ. I've done about 9,500 miles in my Taycan in 10 months, and I've only ever charged that away from home once in that entire time. So it's bizarre. It depends on your use case, right?
It really
does.
Most
of our customers, this is a very sweeping statement, but most of our customers probably aren't sales reps out on the road doing 200, 300, 400 miles a day. They're people that enjoy cars. These aren't probably their only cars. and therefore it's just a different use case. You know, I've had cars where probably I've got through a tank of fuel in 200 odd miles as well, because that's the kind of cars they are, right? You know, we've all owned them. But yeah, I think range anxiety is definitely a thing, but it's getting so much better in the UK in terms of facilities, but also these types of cars, generally speaking, the use cases, I want to get out, I want to enjoy it, then I'll go to a fast charger or I'll go home. It depends on how people are using them.
Which Taycan do you have?
Have the Turbo S, yeah, which is unfortunately my thing. Has to be the quickest. But I love
suitably
it.
loony.
Exactly.
It's so quick.
Yeah, I mean it's quite funny. Our HQ is right on a disused airstrip, a runway, and you know, I think if any of my colleagues or friends need their insides rearranged, I literally just take it up the track, and it's done within a few seconds. So yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's a good. I would like to switch to a larger car, electric car, at some point, and I've just not. For me, for a larger car, I have to be able to go a longer distance, and it's not. I feel like I give it 2 more years, and I'll be able to make the transition on that. But
absolutely.
Short journeys, little electric car or whatever, like short journeys or shorter journeys, it's fine. Like, have you done many long journeys? You said you barely filled it up, so have you done many long journeys?
The longest journey I've done in that Taycan, just on a day's use, is about 220 miles, so pretty much up to the limit, and that was without charging on that particular day. And then another couple of times I've just used the fast charging. I mean, that's the thing, and unfortunately, you get to know about the charges that you can rely on and those that you can't. You know, and that's unfortunately that's still the case. You know, it's very rare that you turn up to a petrol station, there's no petrol. But if you did, you know there's another one around the corner. Whereas actually, you know, with chargers, you kind of need to know they're working. But actually, you know, so for me, I charge it at home. So every morning it's got 240, 250 miles range. Yeah. And, you know, I'm very fortunate that I've got, you know, a relatively fast charger at home. So it's charged, you know, within a few hours at home. It is still a challenge for those who don't have that capability, but you know, it's getting better.
It is. It's, and I think for the people that can't charge at home, an electric car is a very, very, very different proposition, because it's just not the same. So what's the theoretical range? What's the WLTP on your car, and what do you get?
On the Taycan?
On the Taycan, yeah.
Yeah, you know, I couldn't tell you what WLTP is, but I don't always hang about, is the thing. So I do drive it relatively spiritedly. But that's real world. I get that. In real world, I will easily get north of 220. Okay. I rarely get more than 230. I think when I got it this morning, it's showing 252 as a theoretical range. Yeah. So yeah, it really depends, and as I'm sure you know, it does depend on weather. You know, if it's a warmish day, it's great. I remember being October, November last year, and I was probably getting less than 220 maximum. So yeah, it really does depend a bit on that as well.
Yeah, it's funny. I had a family member asking about, they were looking at getting an electric car, and they want to be able to do longer journeys. And in short, you want to be like, okay, but how much of a techie are you? Because using an electric car and charging away from home requires an awful lot of research, apps. Like you need to know charging speeds, you need to know providers, you need to statuses, all this stuff. It's not simple. You can't just get in the car and go, take me there.
No,
but, they do well.
One of the charging networks I don't like to drop too many names. Just me personally, if there's an Instavolt charger somewhere, or if there's an Ionity charger, I know it's A, going to work. B, there's probably more than one of them. So if one's busy, there's a couple there. I used the ones down at Goodwood, for example, last couple of weeks ago. We were doing a track day at Goodwood with our car, and it's perfect. You know,
have they got some at Goodwood now?
We've got some at Goodwood, absolutely. Oh, nice. So, you know, just near where the flying school is, the flying area, just in those bays there's two, I think there might be BP, I can't remember, but
Yeah.
perfect fast charging. And because our Porsche is, able to do fast charging, I think that charged from about, on that day, 30% to 90+% in about 50 minutes. So, very, very useful.
Over lunch or whatever, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
How fast can your cars, what's the battery pack size? What's the theoretical range and how fast can they charge?
On the Porsche it's 53 kilowatt hour, so usable about 50. But you've got to remember that the great thing about that car, because it's light, it's not like a Taycan, which has got, double that battery power, but it's probably 3 times as heavy or certainly twice as heavy.
Yeah.
We're getting about 180-ish mile range on that. Driving it fairly normally, and when I say normally, putting your foot down here and there, but not all the time. If you're driving really, really hard, it's probably nearer 150. And obviously you could theoretically get more than that. But it's I would say, fairly safely 180 miles on that.
That's good.
It's pretty good, right? People again talk about range anxiety. I don't know many people that are going out for a proper drive that are doing more than 150 miles. Probably a lot less than that, really.
The only reason I know that 160, 70, 80 is actually okay is that's basically what I get out of my E208. Like, in terms of if I drive really conservatively, like 67 or something on the motorway, 65, 67, I'll get 180 miles.
Okay.
If I drive at 70, I might get 140.
Right.
So I know that, like, I've done return trips, and most people go, 200 miles or something. Oh, that's not very far. That's not enough. And then you actually look at distances, especially in the UK. If you include any city driving or any slow driving, you get much better economy as such.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. So I think with my Taycan, the reason I'm probably not getting maximum range is because I'm on motorway most of that journey at, dare I say, at least, certainly around the speed limit, put it that way.
Yes.
And therefore, by definition, electric cars, long journeys, motorways are going to be, are very power sapping. Whereas you rightly say, I can drive into London, into Mayfair from my home in Surrey, and my range actually starts going up because it's just not used to being in slow traffic. So that's the other thing that people, just need to get used to, I suppose.
Yeah, I don't know whether you've gone to the level of, like, I now know what, like, depending on driving, that I know what efficiency in terms of, what is it, kilowatts per miles per kilowatt or kilometers per kilowatt or whatever. And I know it ranges for me between like 3 and 7. I think it's 7 would be like crazy around town or something. And then I know if I've got 50% battery. I know it doesn't quite work like that because 50% battery is not the same as half of 100%.
That's right.
Why is that?
So there's a number of calculations that are always going on around a battery management system.
Yeah.
First of all, it is that whole how quickly it discharges power, but also it has to calculate enough residual that every battery will never be empty. There's always, a room for error, which is not even error. It will never fully discharge, because if it fully discharges, you've got problems. So the battery management will always keep it energy in reserve, should we say? Yeah. It's an exact science, but it's a very complicated exact science. But that's the main reason. So it's not like, as you say, half a tank is, it's either half a tank or it's not. It is actually a different calculation on an EV.
And so going back to batteries and stuff, well, carry on with batteries. In the 964, where do you put all the batteries? Do you have you broken them up and there's some here, some there and stuff like that?
Yes, again, so on our cars, we're always very mindful that the car is really the star. We're just changing its heart. In essence, it's still a Porsche. We don't cut the chassis. We put the power electronics, the batteries, the motors where the original bits would have been. So on the Porsche, it's about 2/3, maybe a bit more batteries in the rear where the engine would have been, and then a chunk of them in the front where the fuel tank would have been. So again, we're trying to keep that weight distribution. On something like our GT40, you probably know that the fuel tanks on GT40 are in the sills. So again, our engineering there, which is quite challenging, actually trying to split battery packs up and around into the rear of the car. But that's about the engineering. That's the levels that we go to try and make sure that the cars are, correct when it comes to weight distribution. But yeah, on the Porsche, as I say, it's they're split for that very reason, which is weight distribution.
I know something that some people worry about, and I've seen actually. I've seen a clip of an electric car in someone's garage just going boom,
yeah,
and like leveling the garage.
Yes,
it's not something that anyone wants, but like that was not a couple of years ago or something. But how has that stuff changed now, and are the systems significantly better to stop battery packs overloading and just going boom and setting fire and stuff?
Yeah, don't be wrong. Any car, if its fuel starts to ignite, is going to be a challenge. The big challenge with electric cars is the batteries themselves. Once they go, certainly historically, once they go, they start a chain reaction. There's a lot more fail-safes now, however, in EV batteries, such that the cells are effectively compartmentalized, so that it very much limits the opportunity for that to happen. But you're absolutely right. I think there is unfortunately quite a lot of fear. Some of it kind of warranted, a lot of it not around that, and dare I say, possibly spread by those who don't want EVs to be to be very popular. But yes, there's a lot more safety systems, a lot more safety controls. And I don't know if you've seen, there's a couple of videos out recently around new technologies to sort of suppress that. So I would say they are extremely safe. Are they safer or not than having a huge fuel tank with a load of fuel in it? Yeah, it's how you protect the batteries. Really, it's the same thing, right? If you pierce a fuel tank and you've got an ignition somewhere, then that's going to be a challenge. In the same way, if you can protect the batteries properly in an enclosure that is either impenetrable or very difficult to penetrate, but also the cells themselves are able to not start to worry about a chain reaction, then that's effectively what that's the way to manage these things, really.
Because I was chatting to someone, who was he? Oh yeah, I think it was a dynamics engineer, and about the sort of typical skateboard layout of a car and how previously with a fuel tank you've got, let's say, a side impact. A fuel tank is in a part of the car and it's only a part of it that's accessible, whereas a skateboard layout of batteries, you've got a long edge all the way down the car that you can then, in theory, impact, bend, whatever, do all that sort of stuff. So if you're putting batteries in the sill of a car, what do you do to negate that?
So look, that's all about how you build the batteries themselves to be as safe as possible, and how you enclose them, essentially. So that's effective for the GT40. With something like the Porsche, of course, the impact zones are already there. So we're within the space that would have been there already. So it does depend on the vehicle, and it's all about the design of that vehicle, both in terms of functional safety. How does it drive? How do you ensure it's going to be safe to drive? But also exactly that, making sure that we're using the latest technologies and the latest sort of engineering excellence, really, to ensure that is as safe as a petrol car, really. And that's basically where we are today. The other thing I would say is the reason we don't use a skateboard platform. We could probably re-engineer some of our cars to sort of allow that. And you've probably seen there is a company, I think a German company, that do almost like a platform for a Beetle. So effectively, the Beetle is running on a skateboard. The reason we don't do that is, again, we want to make sure the chassis itself is intact, because everything we do is technically reversible. So if some magic fuel comes out in 5-10 years time, then and somebody wants to reinstall the combustion engine, that's certainly possible with our cars. There's also a possibility that hydrogen will become, more accessible for these cars. Today, in my view, it's not right for these cars, but that there may be a time. But also it means that we can upgrade our cars over time. So if somebody buys, a beautiful 964 from us today, and in 3 years' time, battery tech will invariably get better. We know that already. They can bring the car back to us. We can then put new batteries in, and their old batteries can either be recycled or used as a power wall or some other energy storage. So that's really quite important for us, is to ensure that we don't cut the car and we don't cut the chassis.
Where do you see this sort of tech being in? I know it's really difficult to say. Like in a year, not much different, but like 5 years time, 10 years time, how much do you think will have evolved in terms of battery motor tech and this sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, motor tech probably.
Charging.
Motor tech is pretty interesting. There are a number of manufacturers doing more and more high performance motors, more and more kind of lightweight, smaller motors. So that's definitely a thing. I think more and more power out of a smaller package, and we're already seeing that and using some of those in our cars already. And then the big thing around, is batteries really, and battery tech, whether it's solid state batteries, which have been almost the nirvana, aren't there yet. I think it's fair to say in production numbers, and then just different technologies and different chemistries. So, I think it's fair to say people do have worries around where some of the rare earth materials come from for battery builds today. Increasingly, that's either getting less and less. So, the materials themselves, in terms of quantities, are going down in the batteries. But also, there are now a number of technologies coming through that are using much more available material, and dare I say, are far more recyclable as well. Because it's pointless doing all of this if we're then creating another challenge, another issue. And that, the world has to do that. It has to get to a point where, yes, we can use electric cars, but that in itself has to be sustainable and recyclable. And that's where I think we're going with the battery side of things. Yeah,
totally. I want to see, I'm ready for the solar panels on the roof, not in my car, but I mean, that would be fine. But on the roof of my house, the power wall type situation in the garage or somewhere, and then ideally producing all of my electricity, storing it, car, whatever, all that. Like, I am ready for that. I would love to have that, and I'd be willing to pay more than reasonable to have that.
Yeah, it's so funny you said that. So I agree with you. I think yes, there is a cost benefit over time of not paying energy bills, right? And I'm sure that'll be a lovely place to be. But I think it's just the right thing to be doing. I think people who can afford to do it, I think, should be considering it, because actually, the more people do that, the cost will come down, because by definition, it's all around how many of these things are made, how many batteries are made, how many solar panels are made, and the cost will definitely come down. And I, like you, it's not costing, it's just because I think it's the right thing to do.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people look at electric cars and go, they always say, oh yeah, but the amount of CO2 going into making the car, and that's, it's not been fully debunked as a theory, but it's way less significant than it used to be on modern electric cars. But the usefulness of a battery, I think a lot of people look at an electric car and go, well, once that's done, whatever, 10 years, 100,000 miles or something, it's kaput, and that's the end. Well, the reality is you can use those batteries for powering your house or whatever.
Absolutely.
And they don't need to be anywhere near as powerful as they do in your car. Like they can be operating at 50% and still be extremely effective at your day-to-day tasks. It was an interesting one when you start looking at like kilowatts and all that sort of stuff and how much is charged. And then I don't know whether you cycle. Do you cycle at all?
I do, yeah, not as much as I like.
Yeah, pretty much the same. But if you ever get on like a turbo trainer or a watt bike or something, you know how many watts you can put out, and you go, okay, like, I don't know, 200 watts, that seems like pretty damn hard. Someone like Chris Hoy can do like 2,000 watts, which is 2 kilowatts. And you're like, hang on a minute. My electric car on a slow charger is like 3 kilowatts.
Yeah.
And it will take 24 hours or, something like that to charge. And you go, oh my, this is so much electricity.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know if you've seen, there's a few, oh, good grief. Was it, there's a chap talking to Chris Harris not so long ago about, is there enough power in the system and where does it come from? And that I think hopefully has debunked a lot of that insofar as, the amount of renewable energy the UK is now producing, but also, clearly there are other sources in terms of nuclear as well, but also, looking at how that's growing over time. Every day, or every month, there's more and more wind farms being put in. There's more solar capability in the UK. There's more offshore wind and indeed other power sources. So I think that all being well, as a world, those sorts of things tie in. Now the challenge, of course, is that it's great for those who can afford it. Again, that's doing it. Unfortunately, developing nations are going to be some way off. But I think the great thing is, let's take China. The number of EVs in China is absolutely massive in terms of market share now. And I think, as a planet, we just need to continue to do these things. And I do think technology will get us there. I just hope that it's not too late. I think that the challenges around warming and everything else are real, and people are seeing it now on a daily basis with either flooding or fires and everything else. So, it's an interesting space. And I think the opportunity, I think, for us petrol heads of old is to prove that you can have fun and be sustainable and actually drive something that's fun and engaging as well.
For the dyno juice side of you, that's not in a city or driving your electric car, what toys have you got? What are you driving?
So my fun car is one at the moment is an 812 GTS. So
nice.
Which I love. Although I take it out less and less. It's a weird one because the Everrati car that I have access to, and I use our demonstrator quite a lot, our Porsche. It's just so much, not only so much fun, but it's a talking point. Right? You turn up somewhere, and everybody wants to talk about it. It'll also pretty much beat most things off the lights. It's fun, it's engaging. And also, if I'm honest, I'm now, and I should be, I have to practice what I preach. So my daily is definitely my Taycan.
Yeah.
But also I think, with something like that car, I probably, my use of that car has probably gone down at least 50, 60%. Just because I love driving the Everrati car.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things that you just get to that point. So that's my kind of, I won't even say weekend car. It's probably once every 6 weeks I'm even driving it. And then for her sins, my wife has a G63 AMG, which is unfortunately the yin and yang of our household at the moment. Yeah. So we're that's a whole market in itself, right? When somebody delivers a really cool electric SUV, that's going to be really, really quite something. We're very tiny part of the way with our Land Rover, but it's not the sort of thing that I can see, driving necessarily long distances. Whereas, something like that, I think, the likes of Rivian, I think is really interesting, for example.
I think, and I love what's coming with them, and same with what's the manufacturer? The Ioniq Q, whatever it's called. What is that? Hyundai? Is that Hyundai?
Hyundai.
Just things like a front seat that literally folds flat, like you can use it as a bed. Or I think they have a passenger seat. Does it rotate round so that you can look at the passengers in the back? And like being able to run any powered anything from your car, I love that. And
have you seen the I think it is the barbecue option on the Rivian, where as you probably know, there's a space certainly on the pickup version, and you can get like an option that brings out an electric barbecue. I think. So why wouldn't you? Frankly,
I love the innovation in that space, that we've got a load of people that are not making conventional petrol, whatever cars. And they've just gone, well, why don't we do it like this? Like, why not?
I think that's, and I think it might have even been Elon Musk said it fairly recently, if not a while back, that what a lot of traditional automotive manufacturers haven't yet realised, and increasingly they are, is they're actually now technology companies. They're not, the byproduct is hopefully a beautiful, usable, stunning looking vehicle. But actually it's all about the tech. It's, in our cars, they're 30, 40 plus years old, but the tech in them is right bang up to date in terms of management of them and all the tech that you don't see, frankly. And that's where I think it's really interesting, because if you're looking at it from a tech design perspective as opposed to an automotive perspective, you start to deliver some things that you'd never have done 5 years ago. The likes of having a pull-out barbecue, or the ability to do a tank turn in your 4x4. Why wouldn't you? I mean, if you could. Just a lot more, I guess, innovation that is coming through that makes it a bit more exciting.
Yeah, and I'm quite a techie person, always sort of have been, but I also love all other elements of life and old cars and loud noises and all that sort of stuff. But I agree, with modern cars, the tech is actually a huge part of me buying a. The problem is, once you've experienced certain tech, it's difficult to look back. For example, for me, for a daily usage car that may be going on the motorway or something, and my E208 has this adaptive cruise control and lane assist. Lane assist, not so much, but it's okay. But adaptive cruise control, once you've had adaptive cruise control, it's a whole nother level above normal cruise control. And I had an 812 for a bit. Okay. And it didn't have the adaptive cruise control, it just had normal cruise control. Yeah. And I was getting in and out of another car, even the Peugeot, and I was like, this is doing my head in, because I was using that car for a lot of long journeys. Yeah. And I've since sold it, and I bought a Lusso. Okay. But the Lusso has adaptive cruise control. And all the things people are like, how's the Lusso? I'm like, it's great. And it's great because it's got acoustic glass in the front. It's got the upgraded sound system, which I didn't have previously. And it's got adaptive cruise control. And they're like, yeah, but what about the V12? I'm like, yeah, but the V12's nice. But
it's funny. I had a Lusso for a while. And they're so... I'll be honest, when they very first came out after the FF, I wasn't a massive fan of them. I think they've just grown they've kind of grown into themselves. I think they're great. I think so. Yeah, it's a great car.
But having that, once you've got that tech, it's difficult to go back. And I'm now I just want it all.
It's like CarPlay, isn't it? A few years ago, no one really. What's CarPlay? Is it something that anybody really needs? And then you jump in a car without it, and it's you kind of miss it, which is kind of bizarre. But that's what it's for, right? Technology, things that you don't realise you need, and then all of a sudden you can't live without them, I guess.
And then it's amazing when you get companies like Porsche, coming out with the systems for the older cars. I thought that their PCM, whatever it's called, system for the 964 and then 996. Immediately, I know loads of people that were just like, yep, I'm putting that in my car. Brilliant. I don't want the old system. I want all of this stuff in a system from Porsche. As soon as they make one for a 997, I'm having it in my 997. Absolutely.
No, it's interesting. So obviously we have that in our Porsche. We also have a fully electronic adaptive damper system in our Porsche as well, which again is a very different thing. It's not necessarily something you need on a normal sort of daily cruise, but you start to be able to play with it, and it's a technology that people are now putting into even 997s, and we're using the same in our 964. And you can set it up, you can have fun with it. You can either do a fairly firm setting that's nothing like an original 964, really, really not quite track focused, but as a sort of B-road blast, it's a load of fun. Yeah. Or you can soften it right down and have that as a almost identical feel to original 964, bobbing around at the front and everything else. but it's stuff that people just, why wouldn't you? Again, it's just nice to have, and it's nice to sort of play with. And again, these cars generally aren't daily drivers. They're about having fun. And, as you say, the technology in most of them now allows you to do so many more things than you could have ever done in the past. So it's great.
Yeah, I bought a DSC Sport system for my, I don't know if you've come across that. It's like a new controller unit for Porsche PASM. Okay. So I have a 997 GT3 RS, and you can, any 997, any car that has PASM, you essentially unbolt the 2010 controller and you put in the 2020 controller, and it uses, for the GT3s and turbos, they have the accelerometers and G-force meters and stuff like that in the car, so it can use those sensors. Now, it would be better if they had literally modern stuff in the car, but even that, and I haven't played around with it at all. You just plugged it in. It takes the slack mode, the sort of looser mode, and it's at low speed. The car is a bit more compliant, and then it handles a little bit better when you go faster. And it's a really small thing, and it was a really easy thing to just fit in the car, not too expensive, and like a step change in just usability and stuff. I love those sorts of things. Like, I was chatting to someone yesterday who does old, what does he do? Toyotas and stuff. Jonathan Ward. Don't know if you've come across him. Icon in the States. And he was saying he loves old cars, and all of that stuff, but he doesn't want to drive an old car. He wants all of the latest stuff, or at least bring everything a little bit up, not driving, fixed axles or something, put some suspension in or whatever, not get rid of the leaf springs and stuff like that. Put in the best we can do now, but make it fit and work and all of that. And I am 100% behind that. I don't want to drive something a lot that is just old and old for old sake.
No. And I think that's the thing. And, that's what, he's absolutely right. And that's what we're all about, really, is we love the shapes. We love, lots of these cars are not only iconic, but they're automotive art. You're never going to build another exact 964 today, because different things have changed, right? Things like, dare I say, there's so many things that have changed. You wouldn't build an E-Type today, you wouldn't build a whatever. But they're stunning things. And actually, if you can make them usable, if you can make them reliable, if you can make them a kind of a comfortable place to be, that's the best of both worlds to me. And actually being able to just jump in, use it, know that it's not going to let you down, because by definition EVs are exceptionally reliable. You've got kind of everything there for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And then each person can pick their point on that line. They're like, I want the original and I just want to drive it as original, or I might do some minor tweaks. Everyone does minor tweaks to make it better, just slightly more reliable, or you can go full all the way up to whether it's converting it to electric or changing the powertrain or whatever, doing all of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Well, I normally wrap this up with 5 questions.
Okay.
Do you have a most memorable driving trip or journey?
Yeah, probably for the wrong reasons, actually. It was a trip back from Monaco about 2 years ago, when I went to bed about 6 hours later than I should have done, and drove the car back on my own. Clearly not over the limit, but extremely tired, and then hit traffic. I think just French autoroutes, as you know, are either brilliant or they snarl up for hours. And that was one of those journeys where there was an unplanned stop for a night, put it that way. But jumping out of a car when you're on the wrong side of the road, wrong side of it for tolls and things like that, was not fun. So that was a memorable trip, but not for the right reasons.
I don't know whether you've since learned that they exist. You can get the little toll tags. They're absolute game changer.
Yeah, when you're kicking yourself about 10 minutes into the journey. Yeah, I'm aware of those. Yeah, but that was that. And then look, I love the ability on a Saturday, Sunday morning. I mean, a great trip actually. I just enjoy going out to Goodwood, and at the time I had an F12 actually, and just early in the morning when there's not much on the road, and just get out there and enjoy a car, frankly. And that's, I think that for me, if I may, is the one thing that I hope my kids will have. Yeah. Is still that ability. Now, everything will probably be electric by definition, but there's going to be a load of autonomous cars, there's a load of stuff. And I actually think the ability to just get and enjoy having a drive, I don't want that to be lost.
No. There's something unique about that, isn't it? Whether it, like, whatever car, the car that's special to you, and you get out, whether it's early or late, or you've travelled to be in the middle of nowhere and no one's around, and just have some fun on a road and kind of forget about everything else. 5-car garage.
5-car garage.
Unlimited value.
Unlimited value. So I would say we've got to have clearly one of our Porsches because I love it. Okay,
but so if you had unlimited value, what would be the unlimited budget Everrati project you would like to do? Or have you already done it?
So interesting, we've got a couple of conversations with people at the moment, the cars that I really do want to do. One is a 300 SL Roadster. I love, again, it's art. That car is just achingly beautiful, fully restored. The drivetrain in its day was amazing, but by today's standards, it's it isn't. But actually putting an EV drivetrain in a 300 SL Roadster, I think would be an absolutely amazing thing. I've always loved a BMW M1. I just think it's, again, a just iconic car. I love. If I'm honest, I love the sort of older Land Rover stuff. I think, again, weirdly, I probably wouldn't have it restored. I'd make it look like a beaten up old thing. But with the ability to do stuff with it. I also love, bizarrely, the likes of a Bentley Mulsanne or something that, again, is just a bit beefy, British, in your face. Again, that could be EV. I'm not saying it has to be. And then I'd probably just go something a bit nuts on the Ferrari side. I love so many of them, but I couldn't probably pick one. But love a 250 GTO, but I'd settle for 275.
Something like that,
or something. But something around there would be good fun.
I think that would be a nice mix. I think that's I like that, and because you get a lot of people that is sort of this sort of EV versus combustion war that seems to come out. And in my experience, I was speaking to someone there, and he was like, "Sam, do you like EV cars?" And I said, "I've got an EV car." And he was like, "What?" You're like,
really?
Like, I have one and I use it and it's great. I also enjoy V12 Ferraris and whatever, racing and all this stuff. Like, it's not one or the other. It's like each has their place and their time, and with keep them going and whatever. And like, it doesn't need to be this thing. Everyone can be involved.
It's not all or nothing. It unfortunately probably will be at some point, but it's not all or nothing. Again, what we're about is that choice that, dare I say, a lot of EVs are fairly sterile, and we're offering that ability to have an EV, but in something that is still fun and engaging. And, it's that transition, right? It's that taking somebody from being a pure out-and-out petrol head. I'll never look at that, in that way. There's a couple of Michelin star chefs that are, very, very vocal. I'll never, you'll never put me in an electric car. And yet, actually, when you say to them, look, that's fine, but you've got kids and you're going to have grandkids, and this is only going one way. So you can either embrace it or you can't. But actually, if you look at, let's say, some of the cars that we've been talking about today, they emit their own body weight in CO2 every 2,000 miles. Once you know that, you can't. That's like, you can't unsee it, you can't unhear it, and therefore, whilst we all love petrol still and have fun in petrol cars, this is kind of a really cool halfway house, and that, I think, for me is the key thing. You're right. I still have a combustion engine car. I'm going to have one for a while. there will be a time when I just drive it less and less, and that's already happening. So it's a gradual thing, but we've got to get there, and hopefully we can do it in a fun way.
Yeah, exactly. And the more options and the more people doing different stuff, the better. And you don't have to buy one; you can buy one. And we pointed out that a lot of this stuff is expensive. Like at the moment, you can't get a cheap EV. You can get relatively affordable EVs, but none of them are cheap. And if it was your one car that you've got to do lots of miles in, those don't exist at the cheaper end at all.
Really.
Right, you can only drive one car for the rest of your life, and you've got a £500 banger on the side. So you've got two cars, but one's 500 quid, and one can be whatever you like.
That's really interesting, isn't it? Good grief. I should have prepared for this.
No, it's better.
I think I would say, and I'm not going to mention what we do because that would be, I'd love one of those, but let's say something completely different. I would probably have, dare I say, an EV version of something like I've already mentioned. So something like the 300SL Roadster.
Yeah.
I just think that it's, again, that car for me is one of the most beautiful things that's ever been built. I probably wouldn't have, as I say, I wouldn't have the doors, which is clearly what that car's known for, as in the 300SL. But I just think something that is that stunning, achingly beautiful that you can just drive anywhere would probably be the one for me. Yeah.
I came across a car. Yes, this was Jonathan Ward's suggestion. I've never come across this thing. It was a Bugatti, a round door Bugatti. I don't know whether you've ever seen it. Look it up after this. Round door. No, was it Bugatti or Rolls Royce? I think it's a Bugatti. No, it's a Rolls Royce. Sorry, this is just. I've got this up. It's a Rolls Royce, and it's the round door Rolls Royce, I think.
You don't know if that was at Concours of Elegance to you a few years ago. I'm pretty sure I've seen.
It is one of the coolest looking things I've ever seen, ever. And you're like, actually, that electric
would be
wicked.
Would be wicked. Yeah, it's funny. I was at Concours of Elegance at Windsor Castle, whenever that was, quite a few years ago now. And there was some of those just one-offs, frankly, in there. Just absolutely stunning.
Amazing things, like different era, but it's like so cool now. Right, What do you think is the most undervalued car at the moment? What do you think should be worth more than it currently is, even though we're in a bit of a high at the moment?
I mean, if I look at something like the 458s today, 458 Ferraris, if you consider what they really are, which is the last of an era, they are the last naturally aspirated mid-engine V8 Ferrari.
Yep.
And if look at Speciale, it doesn't even need to be in a Persa, but I think that is probably trading at the moment at a very fair price. I wouldn't say it's massively undervalued, but I can see that appreciating over time, definitely. There are lots of others, but that's the one that probably springs to mind.
It's the special, like a normal 458, I think is great value at the moment. Yeah. Like all cars are a bit expensive. If we could wind back 6 months, this would be a slightly better conversation, but you can't. Yeah. And then I agree, like a Speciale, I think for a lot of people holds quite a place in their sort of mind and hearts, and that's not going to go away, is it really? And any of the replacements, they're different, but they're different in like a different way. Like you drive an F8 or something, it's not the same thing. No. Much more modern, but it doesn't have that zing.
I think that's the thing, and I'm all clearly for upgrading powertrains, and by definition, turbocharging does that. But I think, I think that is the last V8 Ferrari that they're ever going to build as naturally aspirated. Likewise, I loved my F12. I no longer have my F12, but I think that's the last Pininfarina designed naturally aspirated V12. I think arguably that's representing pretty good value at the moment, and I can see that only going one way personally.
Yeah, I look at before I got my 812, I was looking at getting an F12, and then I got man-mathed into an 812. But I look at an F12 and I think it's an amazing looking car. I think the 812 is an impressive looking car, but I don't personally think it's as good looking. And obviously the price difference between the two is quite significant now.
Yeah.
And you look at an F12 and go like, 730 horsepower, that's pretty cool.
It's enough. Yeah.
It's enough.
Exactly, yeah. And that's the thing, right? We all love having a blast, having a blat and everything else, but how many times without losing your license do you really need, and you're right, I think an F12 is a stunning car. I think so. Mine was TDF Blue. I actually love that car. So it's a very classic looking, but I love the big boy Ferraris. I love the V12s. And as I say, they are by definition the last of an era, which is why I still have one, but I'm just not really driving at the moment. So, but they are a load of fun, as you know.
Yeah, I think me getting the 812 was very much like I think I need to have a V12 before I die. And then, not that I thought I was going to die or anything, but before they die. And then the Lusso was like a slightly more practical, but still retaining a lot of that ethos. But they're amazing things. Right. Final question. What is the most interesting car to you at the moment?
I've been, and this is probably a bit of a weird answer, I've been watching Rivian for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think as a concept, I think it's a really interesting proposition, because certainly the price points they appear to be aiming at, which are, fairly, no big 4x4s are truly affordable by definition. Range Rovers and the like are not cheap cars. But I guess where I'm coming from with that is, again, the ability to do a tank turn, the ability to pull out a barbecue, the ability to put literally tons of stuff in it. I think it's just an interesting proposition, and I think it's going to do really well. Personally, I think it's just a vehicle that, and I just hope, I'm sure they're working on this, but I hope that sort of the deliverable in terms of quality and everything else will come with that. But the looks aren't for everybody. I think that the front is an interesting design, but I do think it's just an interesting proposition, just because it has. I think it has the opportunity. If it genuinely has 400 odd mile range, 0 to 60 in 4 seconds, the things that will keep it a load of fun and still be very usable. I think that's a really interesting proposition.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's cool, and I think over time, I can't remember what I was listening to recently, something, and they were talking about the actual cost of making an electric car. Yeah. Now, making a petrol engine car, ICE car, it was tons of development, making them reliable, all that stuff cost a lot of money. Making a hybrid was like taking that initial amount and then adding a whole nother chunk on top. Sure. So they're really expensive. Making an electric car, pure electric, is pretty simple. Like once you've got your electric motor, it's not simple, but relative to trying to put all that other stuff together.
Yeah, definitely. And if you look at, don't be wrong. I think unfortunately for people in our space, the most expensive thing by definition is the batteries. People talk about battery prices going down. They will, but actually for small scale manufacturers, there's still a lot of money. But the really interesting for me is, look at the power output of the motors we're putting in our GT40. 800 horsepower, 100 newtons of torque. That's just in a relatively small package. Yeah. And you just bolt it in.
It'll work.
You just bolt it. You know what I'm saying? Once you know what you're doing, you just bolt it in. Compare that to an 800 horsepower ICE. I mean, it's just, there's no comparison really in terms of complexity, in terms of, management and all the other things that go with it. So,
servicing, absolutely. Servicing almost?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So we should see electric cars get much as soon as the battery cost comes down. Electric cars should get really quite cheap.
Yeah, I think that's right, and I think over time you'll see more and more stuff. Look, I'd love to be able to do one of my first cars was a Mark II Golf GTI. I'd love to be able to do those to a point where people say, okay, it's not as cheap as something, but I still got to have it because it's cool.
Yeah.
And we're not there yet because generally the batteries are just the, especially if you want new, high quality, all the tech we've talked about.
Yeah.
Yes, you could use, I'm sure, batteries in something like that. We that's not something we would never do. But actually being able to blat around in a Mark I or Mark II Golf GTI, it's fully electric, I think would be very, very cool actually. And it will get there. Yeah, we'll get there in terms of price. We're just not there yet.
Yeah. We'll definitely get there. Cool. Well, thanks very much for coming on the podcast.
It's a real pleasure. It's lovely to talk to you, Sam.